Hi, and welcome to the Expansive podcast. My name is Eric Kruger. I'm a keynote speaker and author. And as always, I am joined by my fellow keynote speaker and author, co-pilot, co-host, and now the owner of a big boy microphone, Mr. John Sonne.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah.
After
Thank you.
211 episodes, you have upgraded to a proper podcasting mic. I am so delighted. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, look, I had to eventually make the plunge because I always wanted to get a mic ready for travel, but all these smaller ones just don't do the job, you know? And
No.
I don't know where else I've heard this, but size does matter. And so the mic is definitely here, but I mean, I'm going to have to build a new suitcase to carry it with me wherever I travel, but that's all cool. That's fine. That's what we're doing here. So welcome.
You sound great. You sound like you have that beautiful, raspy, like broadcaster's voice that's coming through. The mic is transforming your entire game. I can see it.
Oh, wow. I'm finally after 200. Imagine our potential now. Yeah, imagine our potential now.
The sky's the limit.
Exactly.
Speaking of potential, we have been nominated again, shortlisted again, for the African Podcast and Voice Awards. So this is very exciting. But last year, we won the Best Career and Entrepreneurship Podcast Award. And we were also nominated, I think, the technology one as well. We were shortlisted for two.
That's right.
We won Best Career and Entrepreneurship. And this year, we are shortlisted for Best Podcast of the Year. Thoughts?
That's a big one. Yes, that's a big one. I mean, it's, again, these things arrive at total surprises. I mean, the first time I heard about this was you making a post on Instagram this morning. And I was like, what? When did this happen?
I had some dude posting about it.
Yeah, these things always come by surprise, but so wonderful. Soon we will be sharing a link for you to help us win this award. It is by voting from our listeners. So we'll be sharing the link soon. So thank you all for being part of this. I mean, it's a huge honor for Podcast of the Year in Africa, which is really quite a hot competition. There's some really amazing podcasters out there doing some incredible things with unbelievable numbers. So we still have a way to go, but we're very, very excited to just be part of this crew.
Yeah, and the one thing, it's so funny, as I was reflecting on last year's journey, the one thing that stood out for me was when we were doing some sort of interview, like I think it was just in the promotion of the whole series. We did an interview and they asked us, what would you say to someone starting a podcast? And your answer was, don't. Your answer was, don't do it unless you are sure that you have the motivation and the endurance and the passion to actually get it through. Because podcasting, for all of its amazing features, is a really tough platform to grow. It really takes effort. And there's just no discoverability, which is kind of the biggest downfall. People have tried to solve it, but it's quite difficult to, like, you don't have a Spotify where you go on and people just naturally go, oh, let me listen to a few episodes here and there. So to be discovered as a podcast is very tough. Most podcasts die in obscurity. So it's always great to have this sort of recognition that comes through. We get it obviously from our listeners, but also this sort of platform. It's amazing to have that.
It really is. But also remember that all podcasts compete against Joe Rogan.
That's true.
Podcasts compete against the top Joe. There's no regional competition. This is like, you got an hour to spend on a podcast. Who are you listening to? Andrew Huberman, The Expansive, or Joe Rogan? I mean, that's a hell of a competition lineup. I think I'd listen to Andrew Huberman first and then Joe Rogan and The Expansive, because I mean, those guys, they're interviewing like these world changing people. So it's a real difficult thing. That's the first thing. And then what is that stats that people stop making pods after what? How many episodes? I think there's
it's like 10.
It's like a
10
general stat, some ridiculous thing.
Yeah, it was very
like
low.
10 or something like that, and then it stops. Yeah. And then also there was another stat that every book that's posted or launched on Amazon, like 1.3 people read it on average. Like the reading of books was also like 0. So for you to have a couple thousand people just reading your books is already like,
it's already
thousands
huge.
of folds bigger than anybody else. It's already huge. You know what I mean? And so with podcasts, it's in the same place because you've really got a limited amount of time to engage with some information, and you've got so many choices. So for us to have a few thousands of people listening to us every month is really just an amazing thing. So thank you so much to all of you, and keep on listening and keep on sharing, and we keep on producing. And here's the next thing: besides you being not just being passionate, it costs money. It reminds me of tennis players. I don't know if you know the stat. If a tennis player outside the top 20 is eating salty cracks, and the tennis players inside the top 10 are multimillionaires.
Yeah.
So the distinction between just outside the top 20, top 30 and being inside is chalk and cheese. And so we outside that A grade podcasting process, and it takes years and momentum to build it, but it costs us money. Like, it literally costs us money. So it's not even a money-making process for us. So, and this is after 280 episodes, So besides you wanting passion, and besides you being super focused on what you're doing, you're competing against the world's best, and it costs you money. So yes, it's a big commitment, in many ways, but we love it. And so here we are with our own radio show.
For sure.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. It's fun.
Listen, before we jump into some expansive insights for the week, what's been happening? Have you been traveling, speaking? What's happening?
Well, the thing is, right now, July, August is summer holidays in America, Europe, and Middle East. So my traveling has kind of come to a slowdown, and I'm actually enjoying just being in Cape Town for a bit. But I am on my way to Denver and then to Dallas. I've just signed up for my 12th Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat.
Oh, nice.
And
very nice.
So I'm on my way to Denver to go and close that Speakers Association. I think we should do a pod about that, but
for sure,
Denver to close the Speakers Association conference there, which is a huge honor. First week of August. Okay. And when I was looking at that, I saw that Dr. Joe had an event just, the week after that finishes. So I'm just a quick flight over into Texas, into Dallas, and spend a week there doing the meditation.
Awesome.
So that's kind of it. Enjoying a little bit of downtime and enjoying it. So what's happening with you?
Yeah, good. I've been traveling to Joburg pretty much weekly at this point for like events, doing the Vertical Code Bold Women thing this week. So going there for the judging this week. Last week keynote, week before that keynote. And then also ran my first leadership lab. I did a leadership lab last year, where it was like an in-person thing. Yeah. And then I thought, let me convert it to an online sort of 2-day, 90-minute session kind of program. Amazing. Sold out in 2 days. And had about 30 leaders join me for this leadership lab session. And dude, it was pretty, it was intense, because my pure intent was just to blow their minds with content. I was like, this isn't a workshop where you come and we're going to do breakout groups and have fun discussions. You're coming here for me to literally just drown you in insights and ideas. And that's what happened. And by day 2, I couldn't speak anymore. It was just felt like a lot, because it was also rehearsing in between. And yeah, but it was really good. So I'm running my next one in August as well.
And tell me, how many repeat leaders do you have, as a percentage, and how many new ones do you have?
For this, sure. In terms of people who've been to any of my events or who have bought stuff from me before, I'd say probably out of the 30 we had about 8, I'd say. So lots of new blood that came through. And also, what was great is that people booked their teams in for it. And that's actually what I want, is I want I'd be happy if 4 teams take up all 30 spots, because what you then do is you create shared mental models. And I've spoken so many times about how important that is for a team. So running my next one in August. It's been a good, busy month. Really enjoying it.
Yeah, well done. I mean, I know when you're quiet because you're not chirping on the WhatsApp groups. I'm like, geez, Eric's not here. He's abandoned us.
You mean when I'm busy?
It's just Robin and I
when
arranging
busy,
the pod.
Yeah. I'm still.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I can feel when you're busy,
level of multitasking. Yeah.
Just to let you, what happened? I saw you posted something about paddle. Were you playing? Were you playing paddle again? Some championship?
Yeah, we were playing club champs.
Yeah. What happened?
I made it to the quarterfinals, and then we got knocked out in the quarterfinals.
Okay. Well done.
Yeah,
that's good. Was it?
It was fun.
Under 16 girls again. What league were you in? Just kidding. Not really. Okay, let's get to expansive insights. I lined you up. I was just lining you up. I
I
saw
could
it
see
coming.
that.
Didn't you see it coming?
I didn't see it coming. I should have.
Yeah,
I
it
should have
had to
known
come.
better. I should have known better.
You didn't see it coming. Okay. Yeah, you should have. You should have. I mean, 280 episodes. When are you going to learn, Eric? Anyway, let's get into expansive insights. We have a cool
right.
episode lined up today.
Yeah. So our very first insight is around something called plant concerts, which I've never heard of before. Luckily, we now have Robin is our producer, and she does research for us to find interesting ideas and things that are happening in the world, and she surfaced this for us, and I'm very happy she did. So it's this idea where people are creating music based on plant frequencies. And I went to go listen to one of these concerts, and it's pretty rad. It's pretty wild. What they are doing is this guy created this little invention called a plant wave. You can actually buy it. So I'm seriously considering getting one. So you get this plant wave little box type thing, and what it does is that you connect the electrodes to the plants. It detects the frequency, and then it converts that frequency into waves, and that wave then gets output as sound. And you can program different sounds onto it. So you can have a piano or a violin or synthesizer sounds, whatever. And then it creates music based on those frequencies. It's a pretty cool thing. Have you heard of this before?
Yes, of course. I've been watching it online for quite a bit. I didn't know that concerts are now being put together, but I have been seeing it on TikTok and Instagram. There's been kind of sharing of that. But also with the Earth Species Project, we've been seeing that, scientists are starting to realize that everything is sending out frequency, everything from animals to plants to trees. And now we're starting to realize that trees have social structures. In a cluster of trees, there's a king, there's an alpha. They are sharing nutrients. And so there's so much of that going on out there that we are very unaware of. The fact that we are now synthesizing the waves and frequency into sound that we can engage with is the beginning of us starting communication with them in many ways. And the Earth Species Project has obviously done this with whales and dolphins, but they're also doing it with plants. So this is slowly but surely getting us to becoming more and more aware of the incredible intelligence that's around us that we've kind of ignored or kind of dismissed in many ways. So I think it's wonderful that this is starting to come right. And if anybody listening to this watches TikTok or Instagram, just go plant concerts and you'll see there's so much of it out there. And every plant's got a different sort of sound and a different frequency. In fact, Earth Species Project also told us that a plant that's dehydrated is sending out SOS signals. And a plant that is healthy is sending out a much more sort of, it's a beautiful frequency. So really amazing to think about that.
What we should actually do is we'll link to the plant wave little box in the show notes, and we'll also link, because I was listening to one of the concerts, so I'll just send that link. I'll send it on the group, and we can just post that in the show note as well. Very relaxing. Nice. Definitely something that will calm your nervous system after a long, busy day.
Well, that's what nature does anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Very good.
Right. So the second insight is around Xiaomi's dark factory. I've always been a huge Xiaomi fan. They kind of fly under the radar, I think, in most Western countries, but they produce excellent tech. And so they've just announced their new dark factory, which is an autonomous 24/7 factory outputting millions and millions of smartphones a year. They can do 60 smartphones per minute in this factory.
Yeah.
60 smartphones per minute. So one per second. And no human interaction at all through the entire factory.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Hey, to think about that. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, this is what Elon Musk is also trying to do. He's trying to get robots that make robots that create products. So that you, from all the way up the chain, there's no humans involved, right up. And the more intelligent these machines and technology and AI becomes, the less humans you'll need in the process of manufacturing. And I think that many people will hear this and go, oh my God, it's so scary. But the truth is it's liberating us from doing mundane work that nobody really enjoyed. I mean, you've seen all those factories in China where they have to put anti-suicide nets because people were just hating their lives doing this work. And
Mm,
so that's all doesn't have to happen. And I
yeah.
understand, yes, what will they do for work? But also there's other things that are arriving. So the mundane work around factory work being taken away, and Xiaomi, it's pronounced Xiaomi. Do you not speak Chinese, Eric?
No, it's
Have you
Xiaomi.
not done any Mandarin
It's
class?
Xiaomi.
No,
It's
Xiaomi.
definitely.
Anyway.
We'll have to check that.
Okay,
I'll
anyway.
Google Translate that.
Yes, okay, that's right. Okay, Google Translate it. So Xiaomi is very much like Apple, you know, but I even think they've taken Apple's sort of DNA and have done other things with it. So they have a Xiaomi shop in Dubai, and I've been to it, and it does feel like you're in an Apple store in many ways.
It's amazing.
But
very,
they've got
very.
other products. Yeah, but they've got range of products, man. They've got cars,
huge
to
range.
everything.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
anything. Yeah. So, well done to them, you know. And also they come in at a fraction of the price because they've got a very different type of selling, and they have MVP products, and yeah, they got a very amazing way
And they don't have human
creating
overheads.
products. Well, slowly but surely they're getting rid of the human overheads. But where it counts, I think they're keeping the human creativity alive. Whereas when it comes to factory work, you don't really need that. So we've gone from dark kitchens, where you have these kitchens creating 15 different types of food out of one kitchen for Uber Eats, and now we're moving into dark factories. And so, yeah, it's amazing. I imagine we'll have dark accounting firms and dark law firms and dark nutritionists places. So yeah, these things are all going to start showing up as we get more and more large language models focused in on specificity. And so each one of us will have an AI representation. Each company will have an AI representation. Each factory will become dark in that way. So this is the extrapolation of where it's going. So well done to them for bringing it out.
I actually think that this dark factory also, like, it's a physical representation, because from what I've seen, the factory itself is actually dark because you don't need humans to be able to see things. So from what I've seen,
that's true.
Like inside the factory, it's actually dark. They've taken out the light.
Right.
So yeah,
wow,
there's like
this,
there are
okay.
There are a few lights around, but mainly it's like it literally is a dark factory. So
yeah, that's interesting you say that, because they were talking about autonomous vehicles, and that autonomous vehicles actually don't need any traffic lights or signage or all of those things are actually distractions. And so when the car's got its GPS coordinates linked to AI, connecting and chatting to every other car on the road, you don't need signs. The cars are communicating with each other in a network process, determining how far each one is from each other. And I don't know if you've seen traffic lights in the future where cars don't stop. It's just they're whizzing past each other with centimeters to miss each other because of the specific timing that they have. So there is no stopping. It's just slowing down to be able to reach the traffic light at the time predetermined to be able to carry on going through, and just slightly missing the other cars on the road, which is kind of scary, but incredibly efficient if you think about it in many ways.
Yeah. I think what happens with all these technologies is that it essentially, or initially when we start off with it, we are able just to incrementally think how it's different from how the world is at the moment. And so you think of like robotics, and we go, well, what we need is a human robot. And so the inclination is to first go, well, how do we build something that represents us, but in robot form? And then as time goes on, your thinking becomes a bit more, I don't know, it becomes more grand, it becomes maybe a bit more disruptive. And you go, oh, well, it doesn't have to be human form. Actually, this other form makes a lot more sense for what it needs to be able to do. Oh, we can have a robot in a little pill that you ingest. Oh, now, you know, it starts doing something very different from what it used to be before. And the same with these factories. Your initial thing is, oh, we need lighting, we need this and that, whatever, for a factory to run. But then you're like, but a robot doesn't really need the light. And when everything is interconnected, it doesn't need to be able to see anything, because it just works off the sensors.
Well, I think a great example of that is building driverless cars with steering wheels. Like, no, you don't. You don't need a steering wheel for a driverless car. Like, there's nobody driving. It's like that's a human that needs that steering wheel. You don't need it in this format. You know,
there must be a name for this phenomenon.
That's changing as well.
There must be a name for it. Have you ever come across a name for it? Anthropomorphizing. What that one?
Yeah, it's like humanizing it initially, and then actually just getting rid of the the human side of it. I have no idea. There must be a term for it, but I mean, look, you also saw the assassination attempt this week. I think we can't not talk about that. I saw Elon Musk came out in full endorsement of Donald Trump because of this, and wow, I mean, what is going on out there in the world is crazy. Besides all the tech, I mean, the upside downness of politics and just amazing. Like, can't keep up really.
So, on to today's kind of main section. I wanted us to talk about the idea and the process of letting go. It's something that came into my awareness probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I've always been, a theme that has always been a part of my life is the idea of flow, like for a very long time. And even to the point where I remember having conversations with coaches 3-4 years ago, and the entire conversation being around like having to maybe have some sort of water feature in my room, like a little waterfall, something that signifies flow, and how do we create more flow? And the meditations that I do from Dr. Joe is how do we generate more flow? So it's been a very big theme. I even think my one word for the year was also flow. It was either my word for the year or it was like my WhatsApp status update for like a year, was around this idea of flow. And so did this like very big meditation about 3-4 weeks ago, had this realization that I'm still in that space where I want to create more flow, but that maybe the way I've been going about it has been the wrong way to do it. And the big theme that just stood out for me was that the best way to create flow is actually to start letting go of things. Because when you hold on, you create an obstruction. And if you can let that go, then the flow starts happening a lot more naturally. But at the same time, it's also not about generating flow, like going through the process of just trying to will it into existence or trying to work it into existence. It's that you have to just be, which is a very difficult thing to do. When you think of a river, rivers don't just generate flow; they just flow. It's just that's their nature. And so for the past 3-4 weeks, this has been really top of mind for me. I've been doing my best to live into this as much as possible. And there's been sort of 2 insights that have cropped up for me as a result of this. And I want to share those 2 insights with you. But before I get into that, I know flow has always been, we've had these conversations many, many times. So where's your head at when it comes to the idea of letting go to create more flow?
I think it goes in exact opposite of what we've been trained to think about ambition and to get things done. And, over the last sort of 20 or 30 years, if I think about the movies I've watched around ambitious people, there's no such thing as flow in those movies. It's about this dogmatic approach towards having more, creating more, being more, and then building a social status around that moreness of who you are. And I always go back to like Wall Street or Wolf of Wall Street or any of these movies that kind of made men specifically to be this kind of like ruthless, overworking, everything was over. You must kill yourself, and the American way of working, I think you get like 2 weeks holiday for the year. Like that, they don't have like that sort of European way of like chilling out or having sort of like a more relaxed expression of life. And America's sort of life expectancy is decreased. They're like dying earlier because of this workaholic approach that most people have created. And so when you talk about flow, there's often for me a sort of hippie idea that's linked to flow, and it's usually from older, more successful men that think that it's hippie-ish. And I can just only relate back to like insurance companies that I've spoken for or tech companies that I've spoken for, and the audience in those conference halls are mostly older men. And when they hear the word flow, it's almost like, oh, this is hippy dippy, stupid like ridiculous ideas. We have KPIs and quarterly profits. And I think we have to be very clear. And when we talk about flow, it's not being ambitious. It's releasing the intensity and anxiousness of how things must show up the way you want them to. And it's not this idea that you just chill out. It's really an idea of how do you become very, very clear in what it is that you're after, but approaching it in a more elegant, more symbiotic way, in allowing it to come to fruition in an easier way. And that's a very hard thing to do. And again, I can only say it from a man's point of view, because as men, we have testosterone running through our bodies, and testosterone is the antithesis of flow, because testosterone says go, get to the end, kill what you need to kill, the competition, and do what you need to do. Whereas flow says be more feminine in your approach, be more conscientious in your approach, and be more patient in your approach. And so for me,
more gentle,
I remember many
soft.
years ago, we did a pod, more gentle. Yeah. And we did the podcast around the law of allowance. And this law of allowance allows you to release the dogmatic approach. And this also very, very much starts in your internal dialogue. Your ability to be kinder and softer with yourself, be more patient, is a practice that we have to do more and more in a world that has no certainty in the future. It's absolutely no certainty. And really the power lies bringing your best self in the gentlest way into the present moment, because this does one thing. It allows you to be more creative and more adaptable. And when you're able to be creative and adaptable in the moment, you slowly but surely release the outcome quite naturally when you make that a sort of practice. So I think just to clear up what flow is and how to be ambitious and in a state of flow is really what we're talking about, not being a hippy dippy sort of chilling out in this process.
Yeah, and I'm glad you defined it like that, because when we talk about flow, we do have this tendency to think of, I think his name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who he was the guy who developed flow as the idea of like being in flow of the work that you do. And that's a good thing. You know, that's when time kind of disappears, everything fades into the background. You are so locked into what you're doing, it feels like nothing else exists around you. That's a great type of flow to be in. But that's also not the flow that we're speaking about here. And the type of flow here is really about the synchronicity of life. And I think it's about just feeling like you are moving in the right direction and not stuck. That would be probably the opposite for me, is that when you're in flow, it feels like things are moving in the right direction. You are seeing some changes in your life. You feel like you're getting closer to the things that matter to you. And the opposite of that would be, I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling like I have no creativity. I feel like I have no productive output. And I feel maybe in some ways stifled as a human being, and most likely stuck in some sort of survival mode. Although it doesn't really necessarily have to be that. It could just be like an intense frustration, really. And I'll tell you where it like always, how it sort of showed up for me is that I've always had this sort of like rhythm to my year, which has been very strange because it's been very repeatable over the past 3-4 years, where coming into like, let's get like say December-ish. So from December, ramping into Q1, Q2, I have this like intense momentum that just goes through that like sort of end of the previous year and start of the new year. And then somewhere around sort of like the end of Q2, it just starts tapering off. And then it feels to me like, so I've had all this flow in my life and all this momentum. It kind of tapers off. And now I have to build that flow again. And it's been so frustrating for me to do that, because like that's, you know, that's not the kind of rhythm that you want in your life. You don't want to have this like heavy high and heavy low. You just want to have something that is more sustaining and more, I don't know why the word gentle just keeps coming back, but gentle in its build. You know, that's what you kind of want. It's like just a perpetual build towards where you're going. And of course, I know that I'm not unrealistic. I know that life will have its peaks and its ups and its downs. But still, I think there's a certain flow that it felt missing to me in my life. And when I was dealing with this pattern where I was thinking about, okay, where like this, I get this like downturn, what do I do about it? the initial thing for me was, well, to create flow, I need to breathe some more energy into this pattern. So meaning I need to do the work of lifting this, like this trough, the bottom. I need to lift it up. And I need to lift that up sort of energetically through effort, through power. That's how I'm going to get this done, is that the graph is sort of fine at the start. It's fine at the end. This middle piece just needs to be lifted. And then when I was going through this like process, I realized actually like what you're doing is you are holding on to the pattern. You need to release the pattern. What you are trying to do is you're trying to take a broken pattern and fix it. Whereas the alternative, which is available to you all the time, is just let it go. Let it go and see what flow starts coming from that. And once I had that, dude, it felt like such a weight kind of just fell off my shoulders. It was pretty incredible. So let me quickly share my first insight with you. The first insight that came following this was that obviously I now had a very top of mind filter through which I was looking at the world, which was how reactive am I being? Like, when things are happening to me, do I let it go, or am I reacting to it? And I've always considered myself someone who's very low on the reactiveness scale. But when I had this filter installed and I was like just going through my day and looking at where I react, I realized that I'm a lot more reactive than I thought I am to the smallest things, like to a WhatsApp message that I received from someone. And like all of a sudden the thought is like, somehow victimizing myself, or like, oh, why would they say this, or why would they do that? I was like, where does this come from? It's so weird. Even with the two dogs, like with Axel and Jaeger, Atlas and Jaeger, it would be like they would do something small and I would have this reaction. I'm like, but like, why are you reacting towards that? Like, they're not trying to be malicious or do anything to you. Like, and so I found this right throughout. Like, it was WhatsApp messages from friends. It was with my two pups. It was with Danica. Like, all of a sudden I realized that I think I'm very low reactive. I'm not that low in reactivity. I'm not like super high, but I'm not that low as low as I thought. And it reminded me of this quote from Viktor Frankl that said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose how we respond. And even then, I thought that we don't actually always need to respond. Very often the best response is to notice the thing, to notice the reaction, and then just to let it go. And that response often feels like, it almost feels like you need to kind of back yourself. You need to say something for you, but it actually adds no value. It's, in a way, like if you think about it from an internet troll point of view, they should all kind of adopt this philosophy, because if you're scrolling online and you see something that triggers you, or that you feel like, oh, I need to say something about it, I promise you, if you spend 2 minutes just thinking about it and just being in the space where you're like, do I really need to respond to this? And you realize you don't. It adds no value to anyone, not even to yourself. And you just let it go. Like, the world is actually a better place for you having let it go. And so that's been a big practice for me, is the notice of reactivity and not modulating my response, but letting go of that response altogether.
How's this? Are you applying this in your marriage?
Yeah, big time. Big time. Yeah.
Yeah, must be a good practice there, because I mean that's really at the coal face of your trigger points and your ability to respond in that way. How's that going?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific example, and nothing is popping to mind right now.
Okay,
but in general,
well, I just want to make a comment about.
Yeah,
I want to make a comment about what you said earlier. Is that we've had this war on crime, war on drugs, war on all sorts of different things. And just by focusing on war on, we keep the structure of the subject alive. I think it was Mother Teresa who said, never invite me to an anti-war protest, invite me to a peace protest. And that's the language we use to keep the structure itself alive, to keep the fight itself alive. And that whole process keeps like what's happened to drugs, the war on drugs? It hasn't worked. There's more drugs in the world than there's ever been, because the whole structure around it was to keep the idea of drugs alive because of the war on it. And when we think about our own lives, we often keep alive the problem by keep reframing it, that we are in this process of having to fight the problem itself. And so that we keep the problem alive by our approach to it. And what you're saying is, by you releasing that dogmatic approach to the problem that you keep recreating to want to solve, you just keep looping in many ways. And I think it was Einstein who said, a clever person needs to solve a problem, a wise person avoids it.
Mm.
And what he's saying to that is that when you create wisdom and you develop wisdom with yourself, you don't have to have the last word. You don't have to have your say into the process, and you really aren't going to be a troll in any way. And the people that troll us on the website, I mean, on the podcast, are incredibly upset with themselves. Like there's no reason for them to want to come out and shout and create noise, but they do. And it's because they're dealing with very, very uncomfortable internal dialogues of themselves. And when you are trolling anybody, or if you're upset with anybody and you are making those comments, realize and remember that they most probably don't give a shit what you're up to. And that just shows you who's wise and who's clever, and who needs to prove their wisdom and who needs to prove their smartness. And so really this letting go it really starts with an internal process. And I'm so glad you're bringing it up, because it's actually helping me talk about it right now. And even though I know the science, but just to hear about it again, I'm like, ooh, there's a couple places I need to take hooks out of my own perspective around things.
Yeah, and it's so good what you're saying, because when something is broken, the first thought is how do we fix it? Whereas often the second thought or the alternative could be, oh, you could just let it go. You don't have to have a response right now to this thing. And even like, if Dan says something that might upset me in some ways, like you might want to respond to that immediately, but sometimes it's not needed. Like you're not going to achieve anything by responding. And I want to kind of caveat that with my second insight, which I had, because what that kind of thinking then leads to is you might go, oh, but like we need a response. Like you need to, if you don't respond to these things, if something upsets you and you don't vocalize it and you don't react to it, aren't you then becoming like a bit apathetic? And I think there's a very important distinction to be made between detachment and letting go and apathy. I sat with this quite a bit, and I realized that there are two different energies here. The energy of apathy is not caring. It is a victim state that we find ourselves in. And it is really like, when you go and look at apathy is contempt. It is disregard for things that should be considered. So it's a very negative energy to be dealing with. Whereas when you look at detachment is a calm power. It is that you are at ease with what the future might bring, because what you are doing is that you are still taking action in the present, but you are releasing the future. So it is a calm power. It is a neutrality towards the outcomes. And ultimately, it's a very playful and curious way of going about life, because, we don't know what the future is going to bring. We can't control it. And so rather be curious about what might your actions of today lead you to tomorrow. So apathy, and I did some more research about that, because I was quite interested in trying to see how do people word it. And they said, when you are in a state of apathy, it is, I don't care what happens. I assume it's going to be bad, and I will put minimum work into changing this, if any. Whereas detachment is, Whereas detachment is, I care what happens, but I won't allow it to knock me off course if it's good or bad. I have no idea what will happen, and I don't attach myself to any outcome. So apathy is when you don't care about the result, and therefore you don't make an effort. So that's the thing, like you don't care. There's just this complete neglect for yourself and for the process and for the outcome. Whereas detachment is making your best effort, but not caring about the result. Apathy is easy. Detachment requires a lifetime of training.
A lifetime of training. It really is the the elegance that is practiced through the process of being okay with outcomes. It's a big one. I think Lao Tzu said, he had a great quote around flow. I think it goes, those who flow as life flows need no other force. And it was Ivanka Trump. I was watching an interview with her on Lex Friedman podcast, and she was saying that her kids are doing samurai sort of philosophy. And one of the samurai philosophies is power with no force. And it's exactly the same thing as this power with no force. If you think about Tai Chi, it's power with no force. It's using your force against you. And I think these Eastern philosophies have a lot to them that we are only really picking up now. And so I like this concept that apathy is, some people figure out that apathy is flow, but really flow in this terms is the ambitious, focused, like sort of directive energy that you have with the release of the exact outcome that you're looking for. And so it's that combo. And then Bashar says it best. He says, follow your highest excitement with zero expectation of outcomes. And it's that process that really you're talking about here. And I imagine that it affects every aspect of your life, right? Were you okay with losing paddle yesterday? How was that when it came to flow?
I'm still letting it go. I'm still letting it go.
Yeah, you're working on that one. That one you're still working on.
But I must tell you, like, even after the game, I said to the guys, we played very good paddle today, and that's actually been enough for me. Like, we didn't make it through to the semis or the finals, but I still enjoyed it because it was still a good day of like tough paddle. Like, it was hard. We played good games.
Yeah.
So I still enjoyed it for that. And I think that's ultimately what we are trying to get to is give your best in the moment, enjoy this moment, be curious in this moment. You can't control what happens next. And so if you get knocked out of that round, that's fine. You gave it your best. You enjoyed it. Now you just get back to the process again. And it's always just that coming back to the process. But I think more than anything, dude, to be honest, my aha moment here was you don't have to fix things. You can let it go. And if you let it go, not in a state of apathy, but in a state of detachment, there's a real power that sits in that. Because we tend to think that the world needs our response or that a situation needs your attention. And very often it doesn't. And the more you let it go, the more you create that space, the more you clear the obstructions so that flow can happen. So that's really been, it's been such a huge thing for me.
You are the obstruction.
You are the obstruction.
Your perspective is the obstruction. You are the obstruction creating the problem to want to solve it. And it's a ridiculous notion. And you'll often people say, I don't want to lose control. I'm in control. I don't want to lose control. And it always comes back to Elizabeth Gilbert from Eat, Pray, Love's quote for me. She says, oh, darling, you never had control. You just had anxiousness. And so it's an addiction to anxiousness to create the problem, to keep reliving the anxiousness so that your addiction can keep getting fed. And by you letting go is almost having to release a personality trait that is continuously looking for drama without you even realizing you're doing it. And then you blame the situation that you've created to feel the drama so that you can again reconfirm that the situation is what created your drama, which is actually not the way it's been done. And so it's a very, very powerful game to play with yourself, to realize all the bullshit that you've created for yourself, to want to keep solving yourself out of it. And, I speak for myself as well. I keep finding, not keep finding, but from time to time, I'm like, oh my God, I just created that problem again. I need to release the problem itself, not try and solve the problem, which is exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, this extends into every aspect of your life. Obviously, we've been speaking about it quite from a personal point of view, but we know that for leaders and organizations moving into the future, this is going to be one of the most important practices for them to actually get right, is to release the idea that as a leader, you have all the answers, to release the idea that as a business, you should operate with a certain business model, to release the idea that AI is going to, destroy your entire world. All of this requires, the practice of letting go isn't just in our personal lives. It is across the entire spectrum of our lives. And so you need to think about it in very broad terms.
I also think there was a little bit of a meme. I'm taking a mockery at work, and it was the company saying, "We need you at 100% all the time." And the response was, "Nothing in this world is at 100% all the time. Stop forcing us and to pretend like we're coming at 100%. I need to be symbiotic with my energy." And so I think what work has done, unfortunately, is created this need to be always on, constantly pressing, constantly focused on this outcome, constantly being in a stressful environment, like war terms. And in corporations, this is somehow kind of like creeped its way in. And it doesn't allow for any sort of idea around flow or any sort of lateral type of creativity. So a lot of corporations need to incorporate this way of thinking so that we can bring a little bit more calmness to the nervous system so decisions can be made with more elegance rather than this dogmaticness that's kind of false in many ways. That nothing else in nature is like this. Nothing else in nature is constantly in harvest. Everything is in symbiosis. And if you continuously press for it to be in constant harvest, you break down. You literally get sick because it's an impossibility to do that. So, yeah, it's a great topic. I think we can talk about this topic forever. And thanks for bringing it up. And I'm so happy that you've had these aha moments. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. And congratulations to all of us for going through a collective letting go. And also congratulations to us for being nominated for Podcast of the Year. So everyone,
well,
again,
look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. We just let it. We didn't even know it was happening. I was like, oh, that happened. Okay, that's nice. Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. The quote for the week is, "You are thinking too much, just let it flow." And that comes from E. Palusak. You're thinking too much, just let it flow. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Expansive. We always appreciate your time and the energy that you spend with us, especially since we said at the start of this podcast, you could be spending that with thousands, if not millions of other podcasts. And so we really appreciate that you are spending that time with us. We will send out some more information on how you can also vote for the pod in the Podcast of the Year nomination. But until then, if you want to feel like you want to leave a review for us, you can do that on iTunes, on Spotify. We love seeing those reviews come through. It really is motivation and fuel for what sometimes feels like you kind of speaking into the abyss.
Into the abyss.
Into the abyss. Yeah. Even though we know we aren't, and we get lots of feedback from everyone. So thank you for that. We are a fortunate podcast to be in that position. But still, we love seeing the reviews come through. And John, always good riffing with you, brother. And thanks for the conversation today about letting go. Until next time, be expansive.
Ciao.